Hello and welcome to Gamers Getting Older,
where a group of older gamers get together
talk about the good old days of gaming
and how times have changed for the better or worse. I'm Brendan.
I'm Steven.
I'm Nick, and we are
Gamers
Getting Older.
Wow, that was
perfect, guys. Perfect.
And that was good, but not great. Hello and welcome to the first ever Gamers Getting Older podcast. We are very new at this, and you probably will be able to tell that. We were going to be real boring and just talk about ourselves for the first 5 minutes of this and give you all the information you wanted to know about us. But instead, we figured we would just post those on our socials. And those are at Gamers Getting Older on Instagram and at Gamer Getting Old on Twitter. Today, we're going to dive into our first systems and what games we played, as well as what we are currently playing and what system those are on. Steven, would you like to start us off? What was your first system?
Mine would probably be a regular Nintendo. I definitely played an Atari later in life, but I think the original Nintendo would have been the first system that I ever played. I do recall as a kid having the Gen 1 Nintendo, the one that opened up like a VCR and you plugged it in and pushed it down. I remember having that one as a kid. I don't ever remember what happened to it. At some point, I ended up with the second Gen 1, which I actually still have today. Like the top loader, not the generic Japanese import one, but the one that's actually made by Nintendo. And it still works. I actually still have most of my games too. So, I mean, it's a console that stuck with me and definitely made an impression. And I remember playing a lot of games on it. I actually just recently hooked it up and showed my wife Bucky O'Hare, because that was one of my favorite Nintendo games to play. I think I still have my original Mario's and a few others, but yeah, that was definitely the console that really sparked my interest in gaming. What about you, Nick?
Probably the original Nintendo as well. I remember playing it at my granny's house. She had the track and field with the full pad and the duck hunt. She hooked us up for classic NES. That was probably my first. I couldn't tell you what game it was, but I remember playing a heck of a lot of classic NES and also Sega, but I can't remember which. I think Nintendo came first.
I definitely remember playing Duck Hunt over at friends' house and stuff with their original Nintendo, but I never actually had an original Nintendo.
Mm-hmm.
I do remember Duck Hunt as well. I remember we had the Duck Hunt gun at one point. That's another thing that I've just lost over time. But you mentioned track and field. I'm not familiar with track and field for Nintendo. So you said it came with a pad. What did that look like? What was track and field on Nintendo?
Well, you know how
Dance Revolution?
Yeah, you know how Dance Revolution comes with a trackpad that has 4 arrows to step on? So I believe this only had 2 buttons to step on. But you would essentially switch between what leg you were stepping at. You would basically just make steps and run in place, and your character would run. And I think to jump, you would either jump or set both of your feet down. I can't remember how to jump, but I remember just running in place like a madman in my granny's front room.
Interesting. Yeah, I'll have to look that one up, because that's a new one. I've definitely not seen that before, and I never played that as a kid. I think most of the stuff that I played was like Mario or more of the mainstream Nintendo games at the time.
Yeah, I was gonna say I was definitely a huge Super Mario.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's crazy too, because I remember playing the first Mario and a lot of the third Mario, and I actually still think I own the second Mario, but I remember being such a different game from 1 and 3, right? You could play as different characters, and the levels were different and the objectives were way different. It was a much different game and feel from 1 and 2 or 1 and 3.
Mm-hmm.
Which one was it where the sun kept jumping down and trying to get you? Was that 2?
I think that was 3, because 2 is the one
3?
where 2 is the one where you play as you can play as Luigi and the princess and
Okay.
Two is the one that was the other game that they just put Mario characters over the other skins and just called it Mario 2 because they thought that Americans wouldn't be able to handle the real Mario 2, which was later released as the Lost Levels. And they're absolutely right. That game. I can't beat the first set of levels. It's ridiculous. I'm glad that we got this silly not Mario game, because I can't beat the Lost Levels.
That's hilarious. I remember playing, I want to say it's 3. 3 is when you had the whistles, right? Or was it 1? I remember playing the crap out of 3, to the point where you knew which world you needed to be in when you first used the whistle, so that it would put you
Mhm.
on the correct line to be able to go to the last world, or to put you on wherever world to be able to use the second whistle to get you to the last world so that you could get to like the tanks, right? And I
Yeah.
remember the first level with the tanks is like on land, and it was a pain in the ass. You're just like trucking through this level, like jumping over tanks, and things are being shot at you, and you're like, oh my god, how am I ever going to beat this? And then I remember the second tank level being a water level, and it literally tested the stamina of your thumb, because like if you didn't want to jump from ship to ship and like fight through it all, you could jump into the water and then just pound the swim button and swim underneath all of the ships. So like you had to make sure you were swimming high enough so that you didn't fall and die, but like you literally could swim under the entire level. So you got to the very last ship and then come up behind it and then jump up and finish the level. I totally remember doing that as a kid.
Absolutely.
What are you guys currently into? Did you dive into the brand new systems? As you guys have a PS5 and what is it, the Xbox? It's not the One S X, it's just the Series X, right? I don't have either one,
Series.
so I'm not sure.
It's the Xbox Series X, I think.
The new one.
The new one.
To answer your question, no, I don't have any of the new consoles. The newest generation I have is Xbox One. I have the original releases of the Xbox One, not the new updated version. I've got the old original factory release.
Yeah, I have an Xbox One S, the white version, that came out with Destiny, and then I have a PS4, also a white version, which was unintentional when I when I bought both of them. I didn't actually intend on having matching consoles, but I do, and now they're not even hooked up. I pretty much do all of my gaming on PC. I've pretty much switched strictly to PC. I think the last thing I played on console was the Spider-Man game on PS4. That being said,
A
Yes.
wonderful game. Gosh, so good.
absolutely loved it. And it's tough because I really, really want to play Miles Morales, but I cannot justify buying a PS5 for a single game.
Yeah. Well, you can get it on the PS4, but I tried to get it on Black Friday or just in that neighborhood of time, and it was all sold out. Because from what I've heard, it's more of an expansion than it is a full game, so it's not really worth the full price tag. But if you can snatch it up for $30, then it's good value.
Can't you just get it digitally? I know you're a big CD guy.
Well, Best Buy didn't have it digitally on sale, and I could have gotten it digitally for that price, but I want it physically.
For those of you that will eventually learn, Nick is very much a physical copy of everything. When we moved into the digital age, I started buying like everything digital because I'm like, oh, this is just way easier. But Nick has convenient. Nick has always been, no, I've got to go out and get a copy from GameStop or wherever, and he still has pretty much a copy of anything and everything he's ever played.
Yeah, but guess what? Hey, do you want to borrow a Switch game? Because I got
This
it.
is true. I only have, I think I have two, and they're the ones my wife bought me when she bought me the Switch, which is
You know so I'm so sorry. You know the most frustrating thing though about buying physical media nowadays is that, so with the Nintendo Switch, it's great. I can let you borrow something, you throw it in, play it, boom. But for PS4 or Xbox, if I let you borrow a game, you're like, oh great, I'll go home and play this in 4 hours after it's installed.
yes.
Why do I have the disc if it has to go through this whole installation process? Does it just have the product key and then it's just like, hey, download the game now?
I've always wondered that too, because it's like, what is the purpose of the disc? You're like, why do I still have a 30 gig download? What is this CD even doing?
Gives you the base game, but then you got the 30 DLCs and patches and everything that they've had since day one come out.
Yeah, but I still feel like even some of the brand new games when they would come out, it was that way, right? You like bought Halo or the next Call of Duty, and it still took 2 hours to install on your Xbox before you could even play it. And you're like, did they release a CD that was so bad that they've already made that many patches? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I wouldn't put it past them.
Yeah, back in the day, they used to just load stuff into memory, and the game would use it when you got to it, and it didn't take all this time to install things into a hard drive. Like I get it, like it makes the game run better with all this stuff stored directly on the hard drive, but sometimes I just want to throw it in and play it. Now the classic PS3 games, like I have the Ratchet and Clank remaster on the PS4, I can just throw that in. There's no install. It's just this newer generation of just installs.
I think that was another big thing on why I've like fell in love with PC gaming. Those install times I absolutely hated on the hard drives and things that are there. But with the new PCs running the NVMe hard drive, you install this like 100 gig game and it installs in like no time flat. Like, and it's absolutely amazing. And then, yeah, it runs crazy smooth. But the fact that I can install it and I'm like, oh, I'm going to go grab some water and a snack. And then I come back and it's like, boom, it's done. It's ready to go. Like let's hop into it and start playing.
Yeah, my current system is the PC and the Nintendo Switch. Could say that I have the newest gen, because I guess the Nintendo Switch is the newest.
You have
gen.
the OLED one though?
No, what's the difference?
The screen is OLED. That's about it.
It's slightly bigger and it's clearer.
Oh, it's definitely slightly bigger.
No, the screen.
I'm sorry.
If you don't,
I don't know. I bought it
already
like
own a
2 years
Switch,
ago.
yeah.
What are you currently playing on the Switch? I find that I have the Switch and I rarely bust it out to play anything.
I play Stardew Valley with the wife.
I've been meaning to get into that.
Great choice.
Yeah,
fun.
I've heard great things
Mhm.
about it. I've heard it's a lot like the original Harvest Moon Back to Nature, which Nick and I just played the hell out of growing up. It's actually, as Nick reaches back in his chair to find his original disc copy from his display case of Harvest Moon Back to Nature. A little bit of history. Nick and I have known one another since we were about 5 years old. So we kind of grew up playing games together. It's actually kind of funny because there's always been games that him and I have played together, both been playing at the same time. And while playing those games, one of us has like accomplished or done something. And then the other person is like, how the hell did you do that? And I actually remember Harvest Moon Back to Nature being one of those that we were like playing through this game. And I had done something in the first part of the game, and like you lose your horse, but then like they brought the horse back to me. Like I ended up keeping the horse. Nick was
I
like,
remember.
how did you get the horse back? Like you're not supposed to keep the horse. I was like,
It's
was-
you planted enough grass and you took care of it and you did a wonderful job and you earned it and I didn't. is what happened. And it's funny you would bring that game up talking about things to play on the Nintendo Switch. Story of Seasons, Friends of Mineral Town is actually a direct remake of that from the original creator.
oh wow.
Nice.
So I actually have that game on Switch if you want to borrow it. look, and so as somebody that buys physical media, it's very rare, but this game actually came with a tiny booklet. It's
Ooh.
tiny, but I was pleasantly surprised to find that this was actually a remake of that game, because the Harvest Moon series continues on as that title continues on, but it is not the guy that made Harvest Moon. He left. Natsume just continues to publish under that game name. Marvelous is publishing his games under the Story of Seasons game titles.
I'll have to check that out because I definitely loved playing Back to Nature, and I remember us playing the crap out of it. And it was definitely a game that we invested a lot of time into, like having our greenhouses built to be able to grow pineapples and just mounds and mounds of pineapples, because that was the easiest way to make money in that game. And then, next thing you know, a hurricane or something would come through and destroy your greenhouse, and it would cost you so much money to rebuild. And it was
I love how casual tornadoes and hurricanes are in that game. By the way, you're fine, but that greenhouse is going to have a bad time.
yeah, it's like they would drop down specifically on the greenhouse and nothing else. Wouldn't touch the rest of your crops, your home, nothing. But that greenhouse had to go.
So, with us talking about the fun times back, in the day, what's one game that you wish you could go back and experience the entirety of the game for the first time, like from start to finish? You have no idea what's happening, and you get to just re-experience the magic that was in that game from start to finish. For me, it was Ocarina of Time on the Nintendo 64.
Why would that be?
I mean, I would
Say that again.
I wasn't gonna call him out.
What happened?
Ocarina of Time.
Okay, well, off.
Sorry, go on.
For me, it was The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time.
So what about that game gives you that feeling that you would want to go back and experience it again?
Because that was one of the first games as a kid that I actually finished like 100% of it, and would be able to, even though I beat it, 30, 40 times when I was younger, still be able to pick it up like it was a brand new game and just keep playing it. And like I would give anything to just have that feeling again of like, I don't know what's going to happen. I love this game. let's keep playing to find out what's going on.
Now,
And,
is it the
like-
story specifically, or the game mechanics, the journey, the time travel mechanic, like what all about it just like brings it together for you and makes it such a good game?
I think it's a little bit of everything, honestly. It might just be the nostalgia of it for me. But I mean, I loved the story, and I mean, like, I can't sit here and say that this game is the best and then not also bring up, Majora's Mask, because both of them are easily in my books like the, two very great games. And
Yeah.
but like just the story overall, I loved, but like you felt connected, and I loved it. And like that's how I felt throughout the years as I've grown up with the Zelda games through, over time.
I definitely remember playing Ocarina of Time and loving all of the side stuff to that game. Like it being an N64 game that like I can't remember which came out first, but like Super Mario 64, right? Like collecting all of the stars and like all of that, like knowing that there was so much to that game, I absolutely loved. But I definitely feel that was with Zelda, like collecting the masks. Like you get the bunny mask, and then you're having to like run through the field to try and find the guy and he's like, "Oh my god, I love your mask." And like there was definitely a lot to that game.
Yeah, like getting, that first time you get the rupee expansion of the wallet, and you're just like, I can carry more than 100.
Oh, and by the way, Mario 64 came out in 1996. Ocarina of Time came out in 98.
Ooh.
Okay, so yeah, so then in my head it made sense. Like I remember playing
Yeah.
64 and then feeling like, yeah, this was like something that
Mhm.
they took into account of like, oh wow, having all this extra stuff was just absolutely awesome.
Yeah, and I personally see Majora's Mask and Ocarina of Time as one single story.
Yeah.
Because it's the same Link. He's just a misadventure. Do you guys remember when the internet was all abuzz with the theory that Majora's Mask was secretly Link's journey to accepting death after he fell down that hole and died?
What do you mean when it was a theory? It's still legit.
Well, it's a good theory, but the funniest thing about it is that if you read the game manual, it says Link journeys to an alternate world.
yeah.
So it's like we're all coming up with stuff, and the game's like, you guys are stupid. It
It's
says
like,
it right here.
You know what, game? You're wrong. This is
Because it made so much sense. Like the place is called Terminal, and it just sounds terminal illness. Terminal, it's bad, but then they're like, it's just like a station, like a terminal,
yeah.
like a train terminal.
Oh yeah.
You guys are weird.
Oh yeah. I remember that whole thing coming out, and I was like, oh, it makes sense. And then you read that, and you're like, well, not really.
Yeah, I was 100% convinced until I just read the game manual.
Yeah.
And that goes to show you that fake news spreads like wildfire.
It's actually interesting that you brought up the dates of like when things were released, because in my head I feel like Zelda was way before the game that I'm going to mention, and actually the game I'm going to mention actually came out before Ocarina of Time, which in my head and in my childhood I don't recall it being before. But if there was one game that I wish I could go back and play beginning to end and have those same feelings and those same connections, would have to be Final Fantasy VII. So I grew up on the Final Fantasy games, played the old school ones, and when 7 came out, the story of 7 just like grabbed a hold of me, and I was like, I want to be Cloud. Like everything about this game, I want to be this guy. I want to be this super soldier and take down these dudes. And yeah, it was amazing. So like I remember playing through that game to the point that when I beat it the first time, obviously I was playing to beat it, knowing that there was a bunch of side stuff that like I was like, I have to go back and play this again. So then even on my second playthrough, my third playthrough, there was things that I was like, were still new to me. And I was like, oh my God, like I didn't do this. Like I remember one playthrough, I got really heavy into chocobo breeding, and I remember constantly saving my game, breeding chocobos and being like, yes, I got a blue one, right? And then like saving and like going through and to get them to breed for color, you also had to race them. So there's this whole aspect that you had the crappy chocobo and you had to race him to S class, which was a pain in itself. And then I remember the same thing, like the same two birds that you would breed to get blue, you had like a 50-50 shot of like blue or green, right? So then I would breed them again, same thing, like save beforehand. I'm like, crap, I got a blue one. Or I'm like, oh yes, I finally got a green one. So then now I've got a blue and green, same thing, race them both up. And then you're like, all right, now I'm going to breed this blue one with this green one in hopes that I get a black one. And I remember it being so cool too, because it wasn't just about getting the gold. It was also about the idea that each one of the colored chocobos had a different like ability, right? So like you would get the green one and you had the ability to run on the world map, but actually just go over mountains. And then the blue one, you had the ability to run across water. And then the black one had both of those abilities, had the ability to run across. And it was only like the shallow water. You couldn't like run into the ocean. But then through that breeding process, if you were able to successfully breed a gold chocobo, it could run across anything. It was basically your airship on legs, except the limitations of the airship were there were certain areas of the map that you couldn't land. So one in particular, an upper corner of the map, there's this round island surrounded by a mountain, and in the middle of it is like forest. And you can't land your airship in forest, and you can't land it on the mountain. The only way to get there is with a gold chocobo, and it contains the strongest materia in the game.
The longest materia in the game.
The strongest and longest. The Knights of the Round Table. A materia.
Every one of
and
them.
the materia in which when you summon Knights of the Round, it summons 12 different knights that do individual attacks to the enemy, decimating all. Right? Like, and I remember finally achieving this and just like the feeling I got when I was able to do so. And there's I could go on and on about that game, but there's so many aspects of that game that I still have those memories from years and years ago of feeling like this is amazing. Like, this is so crazy. I can't believe I finally accomplished this.
Yeah. And this is before you could just get online and look at a video of somebody doing it. This was the first, besides the pictures you saw in a magazine or on a walkthrough that was made out of pure text. This was the first time any of us as kids actually saw a gold chocobo in the game, besides in a picture. So it was an experience, because I mean, I didn't do it. I remember going over to Steven's house as a kid, and it was almost like just me cheering him on when he was fighting some big weapon. I specifically remember Final Fantasy VIII when he defeated, what was it, Omega Weapon?
Yes. Omega Weapon was considered the hardest monster in the game to beat, like even harder than the final boss. And I remember like farming. That's another game too. So like we talk about, like you talk about Majora's Mask, and like 7 and 8 are that for me, because 8 had this whole other aspect to it as well. For those of you that are into MMOs, and if you've played 14, which we'll eventually talk about MMOs later, it's got Triple Triad. Well, Triple Triad stems from Final Fantasy VIII. And the whole aspect of the game in Final Fantasy VIII is you could farm these cards and eventually convert them into items. And one of those items in 8 was like a mega elixir, or it was some sort of item that made you invincible, right? But in order to do that, the card was like the hardest card in the game to get. So not only in order to beat him, they really encouraged you to have this elixir, but you also had, from the beginning to the end of the game, had to play Triple Triad. And you had to play in every town to win certain cards so that you could eventually play this guy to get the best card. And then you would like desynthesize this card into this item. I remember Nick being there like when I beat it, and we thought we were gonna get some like cool ass weapon, because same thing, like internet, we didn't really know like what was gonna happen. And what you get is inside your menu in the PlayStation in Final Fantasy VIII is a little pop-up that just says proof of Omega. And it's got the details stating that you successfully beat the hardest monster in the game. No loot, no.
So you guys keep talking about, before, being able to go onto YouTube and seeing a game tutorial. I miss the days that when you would get a game, you would have to go get like if you wanted to know about the game, you had to go get that big like player
the strategy guide,
the big
basically.
thick book. They have the strategy guide, like they had them at like all the
The
different
strategy
stores.
guide.
Yeah, like the huge thick book that you'd go through, and it's like, okay, I'm stuck on this part. Let's flip to page 94. The third paragraph down. It's like, oh, I'm supposed to do this to get through this part. Haha! I never would have thought of that because I'm an idiot.
That's the only way I got the Fierce Deities mask in Majora's Mask, because I borrowed a friend's strategy guide in middle school.
That's exactly the thing I was thinking of, because I couldn't find it. Like I couldn't do it. I had to borrow my friends to get it. Like it was, oh my God.
We'll be sure to create a post so you guys can see this of any of those that we still have. I know for a fact that I still have the Final Fantasy VII strategy guide and my Final Fantasy VII game. So I'll have to drop a post on Instagram, and everybody will have to check it out and see, like, this is the books that we're talking about if you're not familiar with them, and like the details of them, and like how amazing they were to have. Like, it gave you a step by step on like how to get through the story, but then like each section of the story, like what the side quests were and like how to complete them. It was insane. The same stuff that you could like now find on the internet and do find it very quickly. Like, you were thumbing through a 200-page book to try and find these answers.
Those are both really solid game choices and games that I would also choose as some of my favorites. But just to mix it up and go with a completely different genre, but something that is equally adventurous and fun, I would have to go with Resident Evil 2 on the PlayStation 1. So it was coming off the heels of Resident Evil 1, which was just an amazing game. It was a game based off of a series in Japan called Sweet Home. That being called Sweet Home and the game being called Resident Evil are not connected in any way. It's called Biohazard in Japan, and the American Western team decided to change it to Resident Evil because Biohazard was already copyright in the United States, and the makers of Resident Evil hate the name Resident Evil so much that the guys that made those games won't even call it Resident Evil in interviews. They refuse to call it by that name, which this is all just very funny behind the scenes stuff. But the game itself is absolutely stupendous. I mean, you can play as two different characters. Each character has an A and a B, so that gives you 4 unique playthroughs, which is incredible. This was a 2-disc game back in the day. There's a plethora of weapons. There's lots of secret stuff to get. You can play as a giant hunk of tofu, or as just a hunk himself, named Hunk. There's just so much interesting and twisted lore in the game, and it's a really fun, cheesy action movie to play that has some of the most fun level design and just gameplay that was on the PlayStation 1. So I love that game.
I definitely am a big fan of the Resident Evil series, and I do remember playing that a lot with you. But I still remember my biggest pet peeve with any Resident Evil game is walking by anywhere and there being a 2-foot steel fence next to you, and you're like, you can't climb over it, you can't step over it, right? You're just like, what the hell? And you're like running and running and running to find an opening gate that's like 2.5 blocks around the corner because you can't step over a gate that's 2 feet tall.
Yeah. Or like that log that's just sitting across the road. And it's like, I can clearly step over.
Or
this.
like you'll click it and it'll pop up and say like, there's nothing interesting that direction. Like, well, that's for me to decide.
Right. That is very true. Yeah. But that was definitely a fun game. That was another game that had a lot of puzzles and like kind of side missions and things to do. And I kind of miss that with some of the newer games, right? Like, I feel like everything is so focused on graphics. We kind of miss out on those side missions and those side quests and those things that you did, like that you were like just kind of exploring the game, right? I feel like everything is so focused on multiplayer that really the story is non-existent. Like, you play through the story and
multiplayer or open world.
Yes. Yeah, definitely.
I loved Breath of the Wild. I thought it was amazing. I thought it was a beautiful, gorgeous game. I think I enjoyed Ocarina of Time more, though.
Well, I feel like Ocarina of Time, like games like that, still had this small concept of open world, right? Like, it was an open, contained world, I guess. Like, I remember Ocarina of Time, you're on Epona and you're out in the Hyrule field, and you had this option to go to a few different areas, or you could just run around and shoot.
I think the thing that differentiates it, like, so for Breath of the Wild, is a phenomenal game, but it's so open world that the main plot almost doesn't matter. Like, you can just go to this castle and fight the boss at any time, but if you don't, it's okay. You know what I mean? Nothing bad's gonna happen. But in Ocarina of Time, like, holy crap, everything's messed up. You have to save the world. Like, don't dilly dally. I mean, you still dilly dally and plant like seeds as a kid and then go back as an adult to climb the vines or whatever, like, you still do things, but you're manipulating time, so it's not that big of a deal.
Right. There was more of a sense of urgency that this needed to be done. Or like Majora's Mask, it was like, oh, this moon is going to crash into the planet. Like,
Majora's Mask legit was a timer. Like you didn't like there was no, oh, I can just, mess around. No, you have to finish it in this time. Otherwise you're gonna die. Like that was it. I also still to this day, like you saying that about Breath of the Wild, I have owned it since it came out and still have not beat it just because I don't want to have like I've got that if I beat this, the game is over. And I don't want to. I want to like go. I still going like I haven't played it in months, but I want to go through and make sure I get every single thing before I beat it. Like, yeah, I know I can save it before I do it, but I mean, I like to try to get everything that I possibly can before I go.
I know exactly what you mean. So my nephew comes over and plays games with me, and he loves playing Breath of the Wild. And on my save, I had not fought Ganon. I was doing everything else. I was doing like other side things. I was trying to get things done. I was ready. I was done with the divine beasts, but I wasn't emotionally ready. But he's like, let's go fight Ganon. And I'm like, buddy. And he's like, no, we're going. And so I was forced to go fight Ganon by my nephew. And I was like, whatever. So I did the whole fight with him, and I was forced to do it before I was ready. But that didn't deter me from going back and finishing up like Tari Town or whatever it's called, and all the extra side stuff. The only thing I think I didn't do is I didn't upgrade all the armor to the max, and I didn't get every Korok seed.
Yeah, that's currently what I was doing. Was
what
getting
system
the
is that on?
seeds.
I know I'm
Switch.
terrible. Is it on Switch?
Nintendo Switch.
Yeah.
I have it if you want to borrow it.
I've actually heard great things about it, and that's one I haven't played, but I did not get my Switch until July of last year, so I haven't had it that long. I do have Skyward Sword. I've been playing that one, and I found it's okay. It's a weird adaptation because it came from like the Wii.
Yeah, it was the Wii U, I think.
Yeah, so there's kind of some weird mechanics of like stuff where like it was the Wii U, so you would do certain things with the controller, and it kind of translates a little funky into the Switch. But for the most part, it's been pretty fun. I think I've played through 2 or 3 of the dungeons, and I've been kind of slowly working through that. Like I said, I have a bad habit of like picking up my Switch and actually playing it. I always end up like playing PC games with friends or something like that. Playing Rocket League.
Why?
Yeah. Well, just to make this interesting, I guess, to kind of solidify these, let's say we're all the age we were when we were playing this game, and some big, ugly, snot-nosed bully comes up and says, hey, kid, that game is lame. Why do you like that game? Brendan, how would you even defend Ocarina of Time against Smelly McBully Face?
Ugh, just telling me stupid. It has no taste for culture. I don't know. I didn't get bullied as a kid. I was a big guy. I was a big guy.
He was the bully.
No, I wasn't. Like, I don't know. You're stupid. That's what I'd say. Then probably get my kicked.
Well, Stephen, how would you defend yourself?
I think for me, I would be straight up and be like, you just don't like this game because you can't handle the challenge. Like you can't handle the fact that this game is difficult and it takes time and dedication to get through it, and you're not willing to put in the time to grind. So instead, you're out here playing Mario collecting stars because that's what any other 7-year-old kid would do, while I'm out here kicking bosses' asses, taking names, getting levels, and just grinding it out, bud.
Yeah, but then he responds. He responds and says, "But aren't JRPGs for lame kids? I play Legacy of Kain."
At that point in time, if we're thinking about me back then, when he said the words RPG, I probably would have been slightly confused because I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Honestly, I'd probably be just okay, cool. Like I was a real non-confrontational person.
And I'd be like, you mean Legacy of Kain, that game where basically you can't die, you just die and then you come back from the dead? Yeah, that would make sense. You don't like a challenge.
and just to be clear, I wasn't asking this to see like what like your child selves would say specifically, just more like I wanted you guys to defend your game. Like
you're stupid. Well, that's what you got.
Well, so and the way I would
relive, you made us relive childhood traumas, Nick.
I'm sorry. I would defend Resident Evil 2 by saying that the tank controls are incredibly challenging, but the overall gameplay is very rewarding and fun, and you scared. And that's what I would say.
Aimed you up.
I do remember the original Resident Evils being kind of scary for the age we were playing them.
I remember putting in a Silent Hill game when it was me, you, and I think Brandon. I don't even remember how old we were, but I know this wasn't Silent Hill 1. But there was a scene and we had to like reach inside this hole and none of us would do it. And we just turned it off and went upstairs. We just were like, no, I'm not reaching my hand in that hole.
I do remember the Silent Hill games being like crazy eerie. That's probably the game I can most put to GTFO, Brendan, that we've been playing is like Silent Hill, like some of the characters from Silent Hill. Like for the life of me, I couldn't put my finger on it when we've been playing it, but the fact that he mentioned Silent Hill, I can definitely see like that level of like scariness as an adult playing GTFO that I had as a child playing Silent Hill.
The first time I ever played Silent Hill and the big freaking like triangle head thing showed up, I just like dropped the controller and walked away. I'm like, nope, I'm not doing this. I'm out.
Yeah, that game definitely set precedents for like future scary.
But I was great because it gave you a reason to play all the different scenarios because you had to complete all these other scenarios in these certain orders in order to get the real final ending where Birkin mutates into this giant blob of teeth and flesh on the train so you can take him out and get out and have the famous amazingly bad cutscene at the end where they're like, let's go take down Umbrella. I think Leon gives a thumbs up.
So one thing we try to do on this podcast is a good, not great. And I think Nick has a good one today for GTA. Grand Theft Auto, for those of you that don't know.
Yeah, so I recently received a modded PSP, and I threw the old GTA games on there legally. Of course, don't come after me. I was noticing how much fun I was having the majority of the time playing these games. I mean, they're top down, kind of goofy little shooters that you can run around and get at steal cars and drive around, and it's super fun. It's basically just like Grand Theft Auto is right now, except you can only see like 5 feet in front of you. So you're driving this really fast car, you're having a great time, you're driving down up the block, and then you just smash into a building. If you're on a motorcycle, you smash into a car, fly off of it, die, wake up at the hospital. I mean, it's kind of silly if you go back and play it now with the advances in technology that we have. But I mean, back then it was an amazing game. So it's definitely a really, really good game, but compared to Grand Theft Auto 3, it's not great. Well, that about takes care of episode 1. Thanks for joining us. We're off to dive into live volcanoes head first to look for fresh fossils.
Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Gamers Getting Older and on Twitter at Gamer Getting Old.
And as always, thanks for stopping by. Until next time.
You're like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go Mac, right? Like